Before we get started with this review of a classic album, I wanted to say rest in peace to Malcolm Young. He was the longtime rhythm guitarist of AC/DC, one of the most successful bands ever, probably one of the biggest rock bands of all time. Malcolm Young was from Australia, and he really just crossed over to touch people's hearts worldwide with his music and his skill. And there's been a lot of losses in 2017, but this is definitely one that kind of hit me because I recognized very early on both Malcolm and his brother Angus as being some of the most talented guitarists that I had ever heard, especially whenever I was just getting into music, whenever I was like a young teenager. So much respect, much love. AC/DC, even though things have changed so much, still have a lot of love for many of their albums and many of their songs. What's up everyone, John from ARTV. It's time for a throwback review in honor of Malcolm Young, kicking it all the way back to 1980 for Back in Black, one of the best-selling albums of all time, in fact the second best-selling album ever, and the best ever by an Australian band of course, and one of the best hard rock albums of the 80s and possibly of all time. AC/DC were on the verge of blowing up whenever Highway to Hell came out in 1979. Many of the songs, obviously, like the title track, were taking the world by storm, and this Australian band was starting to see that they weren't just primed for Australia's success, they were going worldwide, and it was felt, obviously, in the United States, the UK, all over the place. And right when they were blowing up, unfortunately their original lead singer Bon Scott passed away. He had a big impact on AC/DC. Obviously, a voice like that just doesn't come along every single day. And at first, they did not know if they could continue on. But here we have Back in Black, the result of them finding Brian Johnson, someone who was in a glam rock band, and they found his voice to be so impactful and charismatic that they thought, hey, we have our new frontman, and quickly they crafted Back in Black. This album started a long-running era where they had a pretty similar lineup, pretty standard for the most part. You had Cliff Johnson on the bass, obviously Malcolm and Angus Young really rounding out the lineup with that guitar work and the writing and that sort of thing, and Brian Johnson, Phil Rudd, those were the primary players behind their records. And Back in Black, like I said, was the start of that, and so many songs that became staples of their live set and just fan favorites are located right here on this record. Hell's Bells, Shoot to Thrill, obviously You Shook Me All Night Long, and the title track, Back in Black, are all found right here. I was introduced to songs off of this album before I even really started getting into music, and it was inadvertently I would hear them in adverts and that sort of thing, obviously used in movie trailers. Back in Black, some of the band's other songs like Thunderstruck were also found there, but I really started to notice them, I think around the age of like 14 or 15. They came out in the movie Iron Man with a couple of songs on the soundtrack prominently used in the film. Back in Black obviously was a big scene early on in the first Iron Man, and I really started paying attention to them then. I got their album Black Ice, I owned some of their songs that I had bought on iTunes and that sort of thing, and I went back and eventually checked out the full Back in Black album probably around age 16. And to be honest, this is absolutely one of my favorite AC/DC albums. It's stayed the test of time because I found it around age 16, and I really haven't stopped coming back to it, at least on a semi-regular basis ever since then. Not to discredit their other work from the 80s at all, I just feel like this is the album that really defined a lot of hard rock. The guitar playing, the skill, the tone of the rhythm guitar, and the leads here are something that made such a bold statement, putting a strong foot forward, and then obviously the vocals really helped sell the sound as well. You wouldn't think that a band like AC/DC, who were on the verge of taking the world by storm and then losing their vocalist and coming back with somebody new, would be as successful as they were, but they continued to be even more successful with this album selling over 20 million copies worldwide. Some of these songs that really made them successful, like Hell's Bells, and obviously, the title track, Back in Black, those are some great songs that I feel like maybe do get a little bit overplayed, but people tend to forget about the deep cuts on the record, and some of the ones that are favorites at live shows, like Shoot to Thrill, which I think is one of the greatest hard rock songs ever made, one of the greatest rock songs, period. Shoot to Thrill is absolutely relentless. The chorus on this song is such a hook. You can hear Brian Johnson's vocals just roaring on this thing. It gets stuck inside your head immediately, and if you haven't revisited this song in a while, please do, because you'll instantly be coming back to it. It's absolutely one of my favorite songs of all time. A track like this this is so powerful and so grand because, yes, it has the vocal gestures, but also the guitars and the nuance there. It has a little breakdown in the middle section where obviously you've got Malcolm playing, and then it comes back loud with this roaring guitar, and then obviously the chorus rolls back around, and then they fire up that guitar solo, which just really knocks it out of the park for me. Another really underrated song from this record, I feel like, is Shake a Leg. This one is such a great song. It's driving with its guitar, its vocal melody, and everything like that all just comes together to make something really, really awesome. Some of the other tracks right before that, don't get me wrong, are really good, but I do feel like it goes on a little bit of a losing spree towards the end just because I've heard You Shook Me All Night Long so many times at this point. I don't want to detract from the fact that it is a great rock song, but I've heard it so much at this time, it just doesn't quite have the staying power like Back in Black or even Shoot to Thrill or Hell's Bells does for me personally. And then you get to Have a Drink on Me, which is probably my least favorite track on the album. It's not exactly a bad song at all, it's just something that feels a little bit too safe and a little bit too similar to the other tracks, and there is very much a connectivity between these songs. There's an electricity charging all of these tracks and fusing them together. And so for that reason, a few of the moments don't stand out as much, but once we get to Shake a Leg, things start to cut loose again, and I'm having a lot of fun with it, especially revisiting this album. What You Do for Money Honey is another one of my top favorites here on the record, and maybe one of my favorite AC/DC tracks. This one, once again, has a nice all-encompassing vibe to it, but it has a more meticulous bass line from Cliff here, which I love. It's kind of a slower start and the slow burn effect. The guitars work their way in, kind of choppy on this one, but it pays off big time, especially with the way that that chorus just soars to life, totally just overwhelms you with the way that you just lose yourself in the track. And that's something that I can actually say for all of this album in general. Whenever you listen to an album like this, especially if you're driving around or you're with friends, or if you're just in a really good mood, this can even further that. It puts you in an even better mood because it's just kind of uplifting, and it, I think, takes you to a happier place. I can't fail to mention the riveting and rocketing guitar on Giving the Dog a Bone and the call and return vocal style that I really appreciate. And then Back in Black, obviously. We know that one's a classic, and if you've never heard that song, what are you doing with your life? Where have you been hiding? What rock are you under? Because come out right now, let's go listen to this song. As soon as you hear those opening guitar riffs, if you're into rock music at all, I feel like this is just one that you know is a staple. If you're ever looking to point somebody in the right direction if they want to get into rock, Back in Black, the album and the song, obviously a great start. Those iconic opening riffs and the up and down on the scale, you can just see how much work and intricacy went into making AC/DC's music, especially on an album like this. Many of the songs on this record come across as anthemic, and that's a big vibe to get from AC/DC, especially whenever they were really taking the world by storm, to put out an album full of anthem-leaning songs that didn't feel like they were trying to be anthems. It just came across kind of fun, maybe hanging out with the boys, whatever it was. This is an album that really just opens your ears and says, okay, we're not trying to be one thing, but this song could be used for many things, and they've gone on to be doing exactly that. Obviously, they've been used all over the place. Even if you don't really know AC/DC, you're watching this review, you've heard the name before, you don't think you know their songs, you probably know their songs. I mean, Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution is another one that comes to mind. It's the closing moment on this record, and it's one that I feel like not a ton of people know by name necessarily, but as soon as you hear the chorus and the guitars on this track, you're probably at least going to be like, okay, yeah, that sounds familiar. The final song I want to mention is Let Me Put My Love Into You. This one you can tell is a little bit more bluesy influenced of like the 1970s style, and obviously this came out in 1980, so you can hear some of the influences, maybe a little bit of their earlier music. You can tell that some early AC/DC records and songs were maybe a bit more moody and blues rock influenced along with the hard rock, and here you can hear that once again because you hear the title of the song and the way that Johnson delivers the line, it sounds a bit odd, let me put my love into you, but I think that it's more of like talking about like, not like, oh, let's have sex, but maybe it is, but I think that it's more of like, let's build this, like you know that you want this to happen, but there's other kind of conflicting lines, so I can't say it's one of my top favorites. It comes across maybe a bit dated in a way, but you just kind of get into the mind of a rock star in 1980 at this point. Sad times we're living in. So many of our rock stars seem to be dying off. Malcolm Young is another on a growing list of people that we've just tragically lost even in the past few years. But Back in Black holds true as one of the best rock albums ever made. What do you guys think? I'm not in love with every single song on this record. I never really have been, but the majority of them, absolutely so. It's definitely a classic, deserving of that title, and me personally, I'm going to give this this album a 4.5 out of 5 and my highest of recommendations. If you've never gotten into AC/DC or tried them before, then please, by all means, go check out their music, check out this album, and let me know what you think. Don't forget to drop a like on the review while you're here, especially if you're enjoying the throwbacks and want to see more of them in the future. If you want to see another throwback review, you can tap right over here, or another recent rock review I did on the channel, you can tap right over here. All of my social media can be found in the description down below, and other than that, I'll see you very soon right here on ARTV.